Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast with myself, Aaron Stokes. And I tell you what, it feels good to be back on this podcast because it's been a long while, and I'm sure Andrew Musgrove has told you all about my holidays, but this time around, I'm the one who gets to have a go at him for not being here. So I'm in the hosting chair today, and I'm delighted to be joined by our regular John Gibson. We're going to talk a lot about last night's win at Nottingham Forest. We're also going to talk on transfers with the window 36 hours away from closing. I'm also going to look ahead to Tottenham this weekend. There's a lot to talk about, and there's no one better to talk about it with. Gibbo, how are you doing on this Thursday morning?
Well, I'm good. I've just about recovered from sleeping in a darkened room after last night's penalty shootout. But we came out on the right side of that and then got a good draw, which made a nice change. So I'm a lot happier than I was.
Well, I tell you what, when Newcastle went 3-1 down in that shootout, I was thinking this might be a little bit of a doom and gloom podcast because, I mean, just to take a step back, Newcastle United have had a really, really tricky summer, haven't they? They've struggled in the transfer market. They haven't really set the world alight so far this season, despite the fact they've won and drawn in the Premier League. They fielded a very, very strong team last night. Forest made 10 changes, and if Newcastle had lost that game after scoring it after 18 seconds, there would have been some meltdown going to this weekend's transfer deadline. How big of a win, John, is this for the morale?
Well, huge. I mean, Newcastle United haven't made a significant signing this window yet, a significant one, a blue chip one I'm talking about. But I think they have, and I don't mean it's Tonali because we'll get all the hackney phrases as good as he was, that he's like a new signing. We'll get all that. But the real new signing that has been wonderful for us is called Lady Luck, because this season we have played against Southampton. We played an hour with 10 men, and we went to 10 men at 0-0, and we somehow won. Then we went down to Bournemouth, and we somehow survived injury time when they had a goal chalked off, and Joe Linton might have got a red card. And then last night, we survived the penalty kick-off after being 3-1 down. And as you say, I mean, losing, getting knocked out, and only having Premier League football for the rest of this year, which is what it would have been before the FA Cup started early next year, is absolutely unthinkable, because Forest have made it abundantly clear that their priority this season is to stay in the Premier League. It is not the domestic cups. They made 10 changes, and it would have been 11 changes if Elliot Anderson hadn't wanted so desperately to play against his old club, and therefore he was allowed to do that. They make 10 changes. We put out a very, very strong side. We're a goal up in 18 seconds, and we've got to go to a penalty shootout, and we're 3-1 down at one stage in a penalty shootout. Lady Luck's been a good signing.
Yeah, not often that Newcastle get that look, certainly in cup competitions. But I think you make a very, very good point there, John, and that is that Forest, their main aim this season is staying in the Premier League. They had no interest really of going through in this competition. They have no ambitions of winning it like Newcastle do. This, let's be honest, is Newcastle United's best chance of silverware. And, they have been handed a massive slice of luck in avoiding all the Premier League big boys who have came into this competition and have a massive advantage by not being able to play each other. But that is probably a discussion for another podcast, and that sounds something like an Andrew Musgrove rant podcast that might be coming next week. Newcastle have had a massive slice of luck. Their last 8 fixtures in cup competitions have been Man United away, Chelsea away, Sunderland away, Fulham away, Blackburn away, City away, Forest away, and Wimbledon away. Just touching on that draw for a second, Wimbledon away next round gives them a huge chance to go far in this competition again, doesn't it?
Massive. I mean, yes, you're absolutely right. The words that you kept repeating there, Aaron, were away, 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 and we're away again. But I tell you what, I'd rather be away at Wimbledon than at home to Manchester City, wouldn't you? And so I was. I mean, I'm watching the draw, and I'm not certain what number we are. I'm keep wondering who's left, and we get down to the last 4 balls, and I'm thinking, please don't give us Chelsea away, for goodness sake, don't give us Chelsea away. And they didn't. And you can't ask for more than Wimbledon away. It's got to be settled on the night. But they're League Two side, for goodness sake. And that is a good draw. As I say, Lady Luck has done us well this season because she's deserted us so much in the past. But we've only played well in patches, Andrew. You know, Aaron, sorry, mate. In all three games, we have only played well against Southampton, against Bournemouth, and against Forest. We've only played well in patches. We haven't played well over the game, over the full 90 minutes. And it's shown. And it's a little bit worrying. Because also, with utmost respect, we've only played three average Premier League sides. Not top Premier League sides, average Premier League sides. The big beasts start on Sunday when we have Spurs up here. And that will decide what is going to happen to us. But hey, we've got to be grateful for what we've got at the moment. And it's been a bit of a disturbing summer. You were right, Aaron, when you were on about that. I mean, we think back. We lost Amanda Staveley and her husband, and Amanda was so popular with the fans and was such a great link. We had Eddie linked with England, sounding unhappy when he did this unexpected press conference about, effectively I need to be back and showing love and showing that I've still got authority. And then we've had all the transfer things about Gordon and other blue chip players and people coming in that haven't as yet. It has been an uneasy summer, and the results have been good in the three games, but the performances have been uneasy as well. And we're desperately looking to get a lift. And that lift will either come through the transfer market and or through a performance for 90 minutes against Spurs. And if we are to beat Spurs, perhaps we need a performance for 90 minutes and not a patchy one.
Well, you've segued perfectly onto my next question there, John, and pretty much answered it for me because the next question to you was going to be, how worrying is the fact that we've had three games so far this season and Newcastle really just haven't looked at the races. Now, Southampton you can sort of write off because they were down to 10 men, they were up against it, they did fantastic to win. Bournemouth on the road, always a tricky place to go. Eddie Howe hasn't beaten them since leaving them, but it was a performance that it didn't excite you. And I think when you looked at the two teams last night, Forest making so many changes, Eddie Howe going so strong with his lineup, and the fact Newcastle were straight out the traps, they scored after 18 seconds, you thought, okay, this is the game. Front foot, pressing, attacking football. Let's kill this game off early. And really, until the last 15 minutes, we didn't really see Newcastle going for it. Now, do you put it down to the fact that they haven't signed any real players that are going to improve this first team? They haven't freshened it up. Do you think the players are maybe tired from a pre-season that included a trip to Australia, then a trip to Germany, then a trip to Japan? Where do you see it going wrong? Well, not going wrong for Newcastle because they're unbeaten this season, but what's concerning you about this team at the moment?
The biggest, I mean, I won't go down the line that the poor souls are a bit tired. Like, I mean, they ought to get into the real world and work the hours some of their fans work, and they'll find out how tired they are. I won't give them that excuse. They might be tired sitting up all night counting their money, but I won't have them tired, and without a shadow of doubt. But my concern is that when Newcastle are at their best, Aaron, we're playing at a high tempo and a high press. That's when we're at the best, when we play with a high tempo, a quickness, and a high press. We've been quite lethargic. We've been quite not one-paced with the amount of pace we've got up front, but mentally playing it at one pace. And we haven't done what we do best. And a lot of the blue chip players have yet to hit top form. And I mean, Gordon's looked nothing like the Gordon of last season as yet. Isak, wonderful player he is, and you'll not get a better fan and a bigger fan of Isak than myself because he is poetry in motion, literally. But he hasn't quite looked the Isak that got 25 goals last season. And I don't mean just because he hasn't scored yet, but he hasn't quite been what he can be. Bruno's heart on his sleeve, and since he's become skipper, heart on every sleeve and every. I mean, he gets a throw in and he celebrates like he's got a winner at Wembley. So his passion comes through without the form being great. We haven't hit form, and if I was Eddie, because the excuses have gone. We're tired because we've done some pre-season. Until we played Forest. We're not even playing, man. We're going to have a fortnight off after we play Spurs. I mean, we almost left ourselves in a position after we played Forest where we're only going to play Premier League for the rest of 2024 if we'd got knocked out the League Cup. I mean, our fixture list is something we're supposed to be going to take advantage of. Um, I do think that the lack of transfer activity has impacted on the team in certain positions because we knew we needed people in. And we haven't got anybody in of any significance. Kelly was a free transfer, good free transfer, but a free transfer. Two goalkeepers. The Greek lad looks as if he's going to go out if they can get him out on loan. And Ruddy's 37, so they don't really count. Um, and we just haven't gone into the transfer market the way we did it when we were originally taken over. And that is very worrying because are we addressing the problems? The problems we have as a squad, Eddie has, and Eddie's fully aware of them and he's pressed for something to be done. We need a right sided centre half to either challenge Shaw or go straight in the team. We've needed an outside right for about 3 transfer windows. We got one and sold him without him playing for us, Minty, and haven't bought anybody else. We've needed a centre forward. What have we done about it? We've gone out and got a Sulu at the last minute for 15 million. Thank goodness for that. But he's tomorrow's man that'll be able to help a little bit today. But he's not going to, shoot us into the Champions League. That would be asking too much of him. And so we're left rather vulnerable and we're left rather weak. Now, when you take Wilson being injured in Germany before he even played a competitive game, and when you take Willock now getting injured at Forest, uh, you begin to realize how thin this squad is if we get nobody in by Friday night and we've got to go with what we've got. Yes, the squad may look good enough on paper, but you don't play on paper and everybody isn't available like they are on paper because you get injuries and we are vulnerable in certain positions and it's inevitable as sure as light full as day that we will get caught out because the injuries will be in vulnerable positions. That happens, doesn't it? That just seems to happen in Newcastle United. We won't get an injury to an outside left where we've got two wonderful ones in Gordon and Barnes. We'll get an injury to a centre half, or Shaw will get a 3-match ban when we've got no cover, etc., etc. And that's with reference to Kraft, who's done an honest to goodness job for us and has done it very, very well. But I emphasise honest to goodness. That is what he is, and that is what you get, and I'm very grateful for that. But you're not going to go in the Champions League with Kraft playing right-sided centre half for 38 games.
Yeah, I think that lady look that you spoke of a few minutes ago might not be shining on Newcastle's injuries this season. Hopefully, it can't get any worse than last season. Now, I will just say, for anyone listening on their podcast provider or watching on YouTube, we're recording this podcast at 11:15 on Thursday morning. There's about just shy of 36 hours to go in the transfer window, and we suspect Newcastle will be busy. John, the points you made there are all apt. We think they definitely need a centre half. I mean, you've said they've needed a right winger for 3 windows. I think they've actually needed it for 3 years since the takeover, really. It's the only position they haven't strengthened. And we will get on to transfers later in the episode. But I want to switch from that negative question that I asked you, John, to a real positive of last night. And that was the return of Sandro Tonali. 10 months out, 308 days without a competitive match. Eddie Howe alluded earlier in the week that he was going to start Sandro Tonali. He did. And he lasted 62 minutes. I've got some stats here just to read out on Tonali's performance. The basic stats of the night were He completed 22 of 28 passes. He completed 33 touches. He had one shot on target, which he probably should have done a little bit better with. He drew 2 fouls. He won half of his ground and aerial duels. But more than the statistics show, John, he looked comfortable in his surroundings. He looked surprisingly fit. And I think just from a human level, he looked delighted to be back. And I think Newcastle fans showed him that type of love about him being back. What did you make of his performance and the fact he returned with such a good showing?
I thought he was absolutely terrific, and I was thrilled to bits for the guy, because it has been a horrendous 10 months for him. When he first came, if you remember, Aaron, he had a wonderful debut against Aston Villa, scored and had a wonderful debut. I felt from there on in, he didn't quite look a £52 million midfielder. His performances didn't stay at that level. What disturbed me during that time as well, I almost felt body language. I almost felt, that he wished he wasn't here. Coming away from AC Milan, the love of his life, having to go because of their financial situation. And don't we know all about that after June the 30th? I felt it, and not knowing the English language, etc. I felt he almost didn't really want to be here. Nothing against us whatsoever, but it was such a different world for him. Now he's come back after 10 months, and he's obviously put that 10 months to great use. And he's looking as if he's loving it to be here. His body language is totally different. I've liked what I've seen and what I've heard recently. He did an interview on Newcastle United's in-house TV in perfect English, and I loved the interview. He was terrific. He opened his heart. He said he's learned that football is a privileged people because he's been out and seen how the fans work and how they graft and how much they still love the club. He's realised how lucky he is. He's realised that the club, the Dome, the club have thrown a shield round him. The players have accepted him. And above all, the fans, who have no reason to initially take Jung because they hadn't seen enough of him to become a hero, but they were so loyal to him during the 10 months and last night. And the man has been moved. I don't think he's an emotional man by nature, outgoing emotion, but he has been moved by it all. And what he is quality. We saw against Forest why Newcastle rated him at 52 million. And what I think he's doing better than he did the first time is that he's bought into the Newcastle United playing style. He's quicker around the park than he was when he first came. Serie A is notoriously slow. They almost play walking football, Serie A. And he came here, with all the skills on the ball, but walking football. We don't play that. We play a high press and a quickness round the park and recovery. And he did it so wonderfully. And he's got terrific vision. There's no blinkers on him. He's a horse with no blinkers on. He's a thoroughbred with no blinkers. He can see everything. And I think he was absolutely terrific. And where the first time round I thought he was terrific against Villa and then dipped, I don't expect him to dip this time. What we've all got to understand is that he's not going to suddenly come in against Spurs and play 90 minutes and play it at the same level and do. Luckily, he's got a fortnight off, though he won't want it. And though I suspect he may not have a fortnight off, he may be away with Italy. The word is he could well be recalled to the international squad. And that's fine because he needs matches. There's no question about that. But he will play a part against Spurs because I think recovery will come into it with him. He did well at the last an hour, and he will certainly not be able to last an hour and a half against Spurs. But whether he's used from the start and brought off, or whether he's, which I think is much more likely, brought on during the second half, I was terrific. I thought he was terrific. And that was the big plus last night with getting through and getting a good draw against Wimbledon. The third plus out of last night was the performance of Tonali.
Well, I think going into last night's game, there was obviously so much excitement around Tonali returning, but I don't think any of us thought we'd be sat here the morning after, talking up his performance so much. We thought it would be good to see him out there for one. We thought it'd be good to get minutes in the legs, but actually he doesn't look like a player who's had 10 months on the sidelines. And I think some of the points you made there were absolutely spot on. I think the fact that he's now fluent in English will help massively. He's had 10 months behind the scenes to really get to know the city, his players, how Eddie Howe's team plays. And I think something you said at the very start of your answer there about, this time last year when we'd seen a couple of games of him, we weren't sure whether he was a £52 million player. And I think people sort of forget that it wasn't all plain sailing before the ban. He'd actually, Newcastle really struggled at the start of the last season. We didn't know whether Joelinton, Bruno or Tonali could play together. And I think this time around, the signs look much better. I know it's early days, but I think he will really have come on physically and mentally for the time out. So very, very good to see him back and playing so well. One midfielder who didn't have as good a night, unfortunately, was Joe Willock. He got off to a fantastic start, 18 seconds in, followed up Alexander Isak's shot fantastically. Looked very, very good on his first start, but as we've come to expect from Joe Willock, he didn't last too long. We don't know yet, as I say, we're recording this on Thursday, we don't know the severity. Eddie Howe didn't seem too confident that it was going to be a minor injury when we spoke to him after the Forest game. I mean, this poor lad can't catch a break, can he?
It's horrendous. And the big difference, you see, between Willock and Tonali is when Tonali had his long time out, he wasn't injured. He was fit. So he wasn't recovering from injury. When Willock had his long time out last season, he was recovering from injury. So when he come back, he was susceptible to injury because you are, after a long time out, injured. Tonali come back in the same game, but wasn't susceptible to injury because he'd never been injured. So there is a huge difference in that. And it caught up with Joe. And so sad to see. I mean, it's sad for us because we want everybody fit to try to get into the Champions League or at least Europe and perhaps win a domestic cup. It's sad for Eddie, who hates him and wants all his squad available. But the most sadness is for him himself. It is a kick in the teeth for him. I mean, his career, it seems an eternity ago when we were talking about it, but when he got a good run in the side during the time when we made the Champions League, we were talking about whether he would play for England or not. And now it's whether he'll play. You can forget the for England or not. And that is awful. It's awful for us, but it's a darn sight more awful for him. And I really, really feel for the boy. He was in tears when he come off, and he's got a good right to be. That was a killer blow for us and a killer blow for him.
Yeah, it was really, really horrible, wasn't it, to see those scenes when he came off and he was clearly so heartbroken. It's a debate that myself and Andrew have had on previous podcasts earlier in the summer about, what Newcastle do with Joe Willock. Now, I was very much in the camp that you need to keep him, you need to let him get back fit again. Andrew maybe suggested that now would be the right time to cash in if you could find a suitor. I mean, this latest setback, and if it proves to be, a major one rather than a minor one, that debate is going to crank up as to whether Newcastle, maybe need to just sort of cut their losses and say, look, Joe, you've been fantastic, but we just can't carry you if you can't stay fit.
Yeah, but haven't we had that debate before? And isn't it called Callum Wilson? I mean, we're going down that debate again. It's all right saying, and I can understand what Andrew was saying, and I can understand what you were saying, but it's all right saying, like, let's cash in. I've been saying that on Callum for how long? But you can't cash in if the guy's not fit, because who's going to want him? That's the trouble is, once you get that label round your neck tied on there, and the label says dodgy fitness, you've got a problem, and it is a problem. And okay, we've got a bit of time between now and January because Willock was never going to be one that was going to go in this transfer window because of his fitness record, which is the same as why Callum hasn't gone in this transfer window. But we've got to sort out what the situation is. But it is awful for the boy. As it's been awful for Callum Wilson, because a fit Callum Wilson and a fit Joe Willock are good players. But now there's a permanent question mark hanging over them both. And where do we go from here? We're going to, hopefully this injury, we don't know at this moment how bad it is. He's certainly, I would think, not going to make Spurs. And then he's got a fortnight's break for the international break. So let's see how quickly he can come back after that. But that lady, look, I talked about us signing, which we have done. Perhaps she can really smile upon Joe because he deserves it. And by Jove, he needs it.
Yeah, hopefully, as we say, that injury doesn't prove to be too serious and he's back soon. As you say, that international break might come at a good time if it gives him a couple of weeks to rest. Before we move on to Spurs, John, I just want to talk about some stuff that Eddie Howe said after the game. Naturally, as you can understand, he was asked about transfers, and there was two main issues that he spoke about. Now, the first one was Newcastle's pursuit of Mark Gahey, who, if you've been living under a rock, then you might not know Newcastle have been slightly interested in the Palace defender. They still haven't got a deal over the line, and as we've said, there's less than 36 hours to go of the window. Now, speaking about the pursuit of Mark Gahey last night, Eddie Howe said, I've been concentrating on the game, but of course we could walk away from the deal. Now, I personally think Newcastle have probably left that a little bit too late to walk away. They've put all their eggs in that Mark Gahey basket in the last couple of weeks. And also before the game last night, interest emerged from Fulham being keen on Miguel Almiron. Now, again, have Fulham maybe left it a little bit too late because Newcastle would obviously need to find a replacement. And on that, Howe said, I would certainly not want to be losing too many players without replacing them, if any. Our squad is not as big as people would expect, so we have to be careful if one of those players goes. What do you make of those comments, John, and what do you sort of make of Newcastle's transfer standing as we head into the final hours of what's been a very, very frustrating summer?
Oh, totally frustrating, and I'm getting more frustrated by the hour. Because only a couple of weeks ago, I would have said Newcastle will never be in this position. I mean, we are now squatting around in blind panic the way we did on June the 30th when we needed to get a couple of people out because otherwise we might get 10 points deducted. We are now a couple of days off the transfer window shutting, and we haven't been able to conclude a significant deal. Let's not talk about we've had 5 in or something. A 37-year-old goalkeeper and a Greek who's coming in a revolving door and going out almost immediately doesn't apply. A cover centre forward in a free transfer, that is not big time. And Newcastle have needed big time. Now, what bothered me, and I emphasize, as you have, the fact that we're talking this given moment and it can change in the next 36 hours, and hopefully it does for the better. But while I was celebrating last night the fact that we'd escaped through Lady Luck in the penalty shootout, 3-1 down, when we got through in the penalty shootout. And while I was delighted about all that, I received a call which brought me down to earth because it was from a contact of mine who I rate very highly in knowing what he's talking about. And it was to suggest two things. One was that we're in grave danger of losing out on Gay because, and if we do, by the way, it's our own fault because we've gone about trying to be clever in structuring a deal to our advantage, X amount down and the rest paid over a certain length of time. Palace have made it pretty clear for a long time that they don't want to go down that road. If you want a superstar, you pay superstar money. They want a lot down at the start because they owe some of the money to Chelsea, so it's not all theirs. And Newcastle wanted to be clever and didn't go down that road. Now, the situation right at the death has suddenly changed because Riyad, who was bought from Real Betis as a replacement, has got injured. And all of a sudden, Palace are saying to themselves, well, I'm sorry, Newcastle, you had your chance. And by the way, so did Liverpool, who evidently have been dicky dancing through a possible deal in the same way as us. Let's put this amount down and that on top if this happens, and if the wind blows from north to south, we'll give you another 5 million, etc., etc. We could be in danger of losing, and we may, if this deal is to be resurrected, we may have to put down a big dollop up top pretty quick to get it through, because the way Palace are suddenly beginning to look at the situation is that Newcastle United had their chance, haven't taken it, and sorry, but the guy we had to replace him is injured, and they made it pretty clear their stance. They've said they want top dollar right from the start. They made Gay captain, although we were trying to sign him. They made Gay cup tied a couple of nights ago, even though we were trying to sign him. You pay the money or you don't get him. And, I'm worried that we're going to miss out on him. And if we're to miss out on him, we better not miss out on him at 10:30 on Friday night. We better miss out on him in time to get a replacement from somewhere else where we've been looking. And what dampened my order even worse, and I don't think this will happen for 1 minute, Aaron, but in the same phone call, I was reliably informed that Mikel Arteta has gone to Edu, who is his director of football, and said, if we are going to take the championship off Manchester City, I need an orthodox centre forward to be the cherry on top of the cake. That they've tried to sell the young boy, the double barrel name that went to Fulham. They're trying to sell the cover centre forward to clubs. They're trying to raise a couple of money, and he's give Edu a short list of 2 players, and he wants one of 2. And those 2 players, I'm told, are Ivan Toney and Alexander Isak. Now, I'm not suggesting before Newcastle fans collectively have the biggest heart attack in the history of football, and I had a heart attack when I was told that, and I'm not suggesting for 1 second Newcastle United would even contemplate selling Isak, and certainly not at this late stage. You may as well close the shop down and sell it if you sell Isak, and I don't think that's happened. If Arteta wants his centre forward, let him go and get Toney. Toney's available. He's cheaper. Toney wants to go. Brentford are willing to let him go. Let him go and get him. But really, that. I was just thinking to myself, Gibbo, you're 36 hours, my son, off the end of a transfer window, and you're worried about whether Isak might be the subject of a bid, Newcastle would turn it down, and whether we're about to miss out on Gay. Haven't we had a long time to actually do something better than that? I mean, poor old Eddie, who keeps saying, and he's absolutely right, if we hold on to our blue chip players, we'll have had a good window. I mean, no wonder he's panicking. There's been talk about Gordon. There's been talk about Isak. There's been talk about Bruno, 100 million. Could it be triggered? We've talked more about players going out than we have about players coming in. Please give me a good end to the season. Get your money down for Gay. Pull the chestnut out of the fire, because I am told the odds have lengthened against Newcastle getting them. And let's turn our back on Isak. I think that'll be the easy bit, turning the back on Isak, because they can go off and get Toney. But getting Gay might be a bit more difficult. Why? Because we've attempted to be clever and it hasn't quite worked.
Well, as you were building up to that Arsenal line there, I was hoping you were going to say that they're really keen to sign Ivan Toney and William Asula, but unfortunately, it's Alexander Isak, who you said.
You can see why Arteta would like Isak, though, wouldn't you? Because he plays like Thierry Henry.
Well, I think any club in the world would probably like Alexander Isak's talents, and I think. This Arsenal interest has been around earlier in the summer, and there was, of course, interest with Chelsea when Newcastle was so desperate to sell earlier in the summer. But I think that's the big key. I think if any of these clubs had came in with a big offer earlier in the summer, I still don't think they would have got anywhere, but they certainly would have had a much better chance than they will 36 hours out from the window. And I think on that, and moving to Mark Gay, I mean, when we saw he was starting for Crystal Palace on Tuesday night, we all sort of said, right, that's got to be it. Then his defensive partner gets injured after 14 minutes, and that looks like a serious one. That again adds another a hurdle to the deal. Then you've got the fact he's been made captain. Then you've got the fact that he's been Newcastle have been at the negotiating table for 4 or 5 weeks. They've had 4 offers rejected. Look, I'm ever an optimist. That my glass is always half full, not half empty, and I don't want to sound too negative here. But if Newcastle don't get a centre-back in between now and Friday night, and they don't get a right winger in between now and Friday night, how poor of a transfer window has this been, regardless of keeping Bruno, keeping Gordon, keeping Isak? It's been a poor one, hasn't it?
Or if we don't make a significant signing, at least one, and ideally two, and we're not going to make two, it's been a dreadful window. And it's not been the sort of window Paul Mitchell needs for his first start and his first window at Newcastle United. And I hasten to add, I'm not at all blaming Paul. I don't know what's gone on behind the scenes. None of us do. But it doesn't rest easy for him. Had he got Gay in and then outside right, would have said we've been and kept all the players, we've been cooking. But if we get to midnight when we're lying in bed going to sleep on Friday night, and Newcastle have not signed a centre half and or an outside right, then it has been a very, very poor window. And yes, we'll be told by the club Tonali's like a new signing. We'll be told by the club Harvey Barnes this year will be like a new signing, etc., etc. That doesn't wash. That's not enough. If we don't get two signings, or at the very least one, before the transfer deadline, do we honestly believe we can make the Champions League? Only if Lady Luck leaves everybody fit and Joe Willock gets off his bed of nails and starts break dancing before the international break's over. Otherwise, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it because we need strength and depth to do it. You're talking about the top four for the everybody in Geordieland talks about the Champions League. How difficult is it, Evan? If you say Man City and Arsenal have got two places nailed on, and you're then looking at Liverpool, you're looking at Spurs, you're looking at Aston Villa, you're looking at Newcastle, you're looking, I don't know, will some outsider come out of the woodwork like Brighton, which Aston Villa did a little while back? It's not easy. Believe you me, it's not easy. You can finish seventh and not be in Europe at all, as we did last season. I'm not suspecting that. I'm not wanting that. I'm wanting to be positive. I think there's good reason to be positive, but the best reason to be positive is that we've still got 36 hours. When that becomes just 6 hours, we would have a different conversation, wouldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will be bringing a very special podcast to your devices and to YouTube after the deadline, and hopefully I'll be sitting on that podcast talking about how they've got a brand spanking new shiny signing through the door, whether that's a defender or a right winger. There's also going to be plenty of interest around what happens to Kieran Trippier, what happens to Miguel Almiron. So it's going to be a very, very big 36 hours. We'll move on to Spurs, John, and talk about this weekend's Premier League clash. Another big one for Newcastle. They really need a big morale-boosting win again. And in recent years, this fixture has often provided that. We've had the famous 6-1 at St James's Park. We had the famous 4-0 at St James's Park. Will Tottenham be coming up to St James's Park thinking, this is our new least favourite ground in the Premier League this weekend?
Oh, they'll be thinking that, but they might also be thinking, we've looked at the videos of Newcastle's first three games and we think we've got a chance here. And Ange is a bit like, Big Ange is a bit like Eddie. He's full of optimism and full of front foot. And therefore he'll be fancying his chances a little bit. I think Spurs are one of the big clubs that are vulnerable. The alleged Super Six that are vulnerable, a bit like Chelsea have been, but for different reasons. But on the day, with the players they've got, they can be hugely dangerous. And this is a step up for Newcastle this season because, with utmost respect, Southampton, newly promoted, Bournemouth, as good as they are, they're Bournemouth. They're not Liverpool or Man City or Arsenal, and Nottingham Forest proved in the League Cup that their height of ambition is to stay in the Premier League. So this is a step up in class against Spurs, and we have got to rise to that challenge. And the fact that we're at home with a good record against Spurs, and they seem to find us difficult, yes, we can get something here, but we're gonna have to play better than we have so far this season for longer time than we have. If we do little patches of quarter an hour play, I mean, in the last couple of games, Ivan, we've started the games terrific. Then we've been hopeless. Then we've finished it okay. But the bit in between the meat and the sandwich is what's important. And we will need more consistency over 90 minutes than we have shown so far this season to get a result against Spurs. But also, I'm not pessimistic about Spurs. Spurs are the sort of flaky team that give you a chance. And if we go about this the right way and we're at home, and that's hugely different to away. I mean, look at us away last season, 11 defeats and 19. And this season we've played away twice and drawn twice, really, because we beat Forest on penalties, drawn twice over 90 minutes. So we stopped the losing but haven't done the winning. But we're at home here. And we're home not like Southampton, where we were 10 against 11 for an hour. We're home, hopefully, with 11 against 11 for an hour and a half. But it's a challenge. Spurs are the first of the big beasts we're facing, and we've got to put them to the book. Otherwise, I mean, we will know where we are by the we kick off against Spurs. We'll know that all the blue chip players are still with us, and we'll know we've got a sign now we haven't. Whether he plays in that game if we have a signing, or it's too quick and they give him the fortnight to bed in, or he's an international, he's away, and then he rejoins us. But we'll know exactly where we are, and Eddie will know exactly where we are by the time we kick off against Spurs.
Yeah, it's going to be a big marker, isn't it, to how far Newcastle have come or how far they've got to go, as you say, facing the first real big side of note. No disrespect to anyone who Newcastle have faced so far, of course. Big questions, John, for Eddie Howe to answer in terms of who he starts, because I think we should run through the team together, because I think there's some positions that pick themselves, but other positions where there might be a little bit of disagreement. So Nick Pope will start in goal.
Yeah. I mean, it's the one thing we can say with some
with absolute confidence.
What a surprise. We'll both agree Nick Pope will start in goal. Yes, he will.
I suspect. Sorry, John, go on.
No, sorry. But for me, once we get on the back four, I'll just throw it straight in. I'm playing Trippier, although I'm a big fan of Livramento. I think Trippier has that little bit extra nous. I'm surprised I'm saying this. Long term, it's going to be all about Livramento. In this one, Trippier against Spurs, his old club, he's got a little bit more nous. He's got a little bit more consistency, if you like. Kraft has got to play right side because there's no alternative. Right side of centre halves.
Well, you say that, John, but who knows? It could be Mark Gay and Dan Burn at centre back come Sunday lunchtime.
Yeah, and I can see a pink pig flying past my window here as well. But there we go.
No, I agree.
It could be. And if we got Gay in time, he's fit enough to go in because he's been playing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I'm not certain that we are. And I mean, if you sign him, for example, if you sign him on Friday night at about 9 o'clock, before the deadline, you're not going to play him on Sunday. He's going to have to shake hands with some of the players before he comes. And Kraft has done okay as a one. I mean, I'm presuming that we haven't got anybody that's going to be available for Sunday.
Yeah,
not that we haven't got anybody, but available for Sunday.
I agree.
If that's the case, I go Trippier, Kraft, Burn. And really, I look at Hall and Kelly and I worry about both of them. I suppose I'll stick with Hall. But I mean, Kelly, I felt struggled at his old club, Bournemouth. And Hall is wonderful going forward. But I mean, he loses people off his shoulders running behind him, something horrible. I mean, he's smashing, marauding forward, but all of a sudden you see people running off the back of him and you think, goodness gracious me. And so you can pick whoever you want between Kelly and Hall to play left back and I'll accept it.
Well, Andrew often accuses me of sitting on the fence on this podcast, but I think I'm going to do that again in two positions because if I'm completely honest, I don't really have a big opinion between Trippier and Tino because I think Tino has probably had more game time, but I actually thought Kieran Trippier played very, very well against Bournemouth when he came on. I thought he changed the game. I think he's getting up to speed. So I don't really have a big qualm if either of them start. I suspect it might be Lewis Hall on Sunday, but again, I don't really matter. I don't really mind who plays on the left either. I do think it will be Kraft and Byrne at centre half though. Moving into midfield, I think we'll probably agree that it is going to be Bruno Longstaff Joelinton. You suspect?
I think almost certain.
Yeah.
I would say 100%. I don't think he'll start with Tonali. Tonali will be up his sleeve and will definitely come on at some stage in the second half. But he'll want us to establish our foothold early, to have people that can get round the park, which Longstaff does. And he likes Longstaff. And of course, the two Brazilians would be either side of Longstaff. So I think they'll be the three, and Tonali will, without question, come on and be a good influence in the second half.
I would agree with that, but I think when we move to the final three positions, I think there's a real debate to be had because we know Alexander Isak's going to start through the middle. He loves scoring against Tottenham. He's the main man. Eddie Howe so far this season has gone with Murphy on the right and Gordon on the left, but we saw a real change of pace from Newcastle when Barnes came on at Bournemouth, played down the left. Gordon obviously scores the equaliser off the right. And we've seen a lot of clamour from fans for that to be the three that he goes with. Now, I think he probably reverts to what he started with. I think we'll see Murphy, Isak and Gordon, because I think having Harvey Barnes as an option off the bench is a fantastic option when the game's gone stale and he needs something to change it. But I don't think Jacob Murphy and Miguel Almiron's positions are as steady as they maybe were at the start of the season. He's got options now to change it, hasn't he?
Yeah. I hope he doesn't start with Murphy. And I love Murphy. I think he's a smashing lad. I've advocated he stays at the club, and I think he's very effective off the bench. He had a great pre-season. Then he started in the team. Before it got to half an hour, he was off against Southampton because he had to be sacrificed because of the 10 men. And then he was disappointing in the next game. I don't think he's justified being on. Almiron looked lively last night. I would go with what the fans are saying. I would go with Isak, Gordon and Barnes either side of him. I'm all for having people that's good off the bench, but I'll tell you something, I like to start well and let's get two up when we start. Never mind about keeping somebody on the bench because he might be good in the second half. The game might have run away with us by then. Let's start our best players, get ahead, and then turn to the bench and say, what have we got? Oh, we've got Tonali and we've got Kelly and we've got Almiron and Murphy. That's terrific. Never mind about keeping somebody up the sleeve. Get them down the sleeve, get them on the pitch, and let's get 2-0 up. I like starting my best players, and I would go Gordon, Isak, Barnes. I'm not suggesting that the boss will, because I think he sees both Gordon and Barnes as two outside lefts, which essentially are. Which poses another question, not for today, Aaron, but why on earth did we buy two outside lefts and no outside right? I mean, we already had Gordon when we bought Barnes for the same position. And if you just glance a little bit that way on the other side of the field, there's nobody. Why do we want two outside lefts and no outside right?
Well, maybe this has been part of the big master plan that we're finally going to see Anthony Gordon out on the right, and he's been priming Barnes for his spot on the left. I think a lot of people that are listening to this, that are watching this, that are generally just talking about on social media, I think they will be wholly in agreement with you that it's time to start Gordon on the right and give Barnes a chance. And like you say, I'm not sure whether Eddie will, but I think it's certainly an option that he'll be considering going forward. Just to finish, John, we've obviously touched on the fact Newcastle have a very good record against Spurs in recent seasons at home, but we've also spoken about how they've struggled so far this season to really lay down markers with their performances. How do you see it going, and what's your prediction for Sunday?
Yes, it's such a good one. You can go three different ways all at once and disappear up your own trouser leg,
Go
couldn't
on,
you?
sit on the fence like I do.
No, I'm not. I'm not good. But sometimes, when people say draws, they say, "Oh, you're sitting." I'm not meaning you were going to say it, but they say you're sitting on the fence. Well, you're not. You're picking one of three results: win, draw, or lose.
Exactly.
It's not sitting on the fence. It's an opinion. Um, I can be wary about this, but I'm not going to be. We're at home. We're at home against a big beast, but we're at home against a vulnerable big beast. I'd rather play Spurs than play Arsenal or Man City. Spurs are going to give you more chance than Arsenal or Man City are of getting a result against them. Um, and I think it will be very, very close. I can see it ending in a draw, but I believe we're just going to win it by a single goal. By that, I mean it could be 2-1. I'm not meaning 1-0. It could be 2-1, but there's not going to be a two-goal margin. I think we'll win by a single goal, and it will be hard fought. And by Jove, I hope I'm right.
Yeah, look, I think I agree with you. I think the fact they're at home is going to be massive. I think the fact they've got that win yesterday is sort of pulling a victory from the jaws of defeat with that penalty shootout win. I think that'll give them a huge boost Sunday. And maybe it's just me, but I'm always confident when Newcastle play at St James's Park because we know when they turn it on, they're a different animal. So I'm going to go with a 3-1 Newcastle win. I think I'm going to go optimistic.
Well, there you are. That's not sitting on the fence, baby. That's
Exactly.
big
So,
time. 3-1, mate. I'll tell Andrew that it's nice to work with somebody very positive for a change.
yeah, if you can relay that feedback to him, that would be great. Because he does like to beat me with that stick often. But yeah, look, I'm going to go for a big win. John, thanks very much for joining us. We've got through a lot there. I feel like we could have probably spoken for 2 or 3 hours, given how busy it is at the moment. But it'll be good to see you on Sunday at St James's Park. And thanks very much for joining us. Thank you for watching on YouTube and listening on your podcast provider. We'll be back with a view from the opposition and a deadline day podcast with myself in the next couple of days. Until then, we'll speak to you very, very soon.
Take care.